Welcome to the Guard Exile. Are you ready to leave shattered corpses in your wake and destroy content as your league starts? Is it that you want to flee away from enemies and watch them mindlessly stand still? What you need then is a real pantless man, one who benches 6 totems while running around without breaking a sweat as the enemies succumb to their inevitable cold demise. For that, you most definitely want to try this Pantless Freezing Pulse Hierophant League starter, where we make use of the Templar's Hierophant Ascendancy to get up to 6 totems supported by Freezing Pulse. Its fast projectiles is the best choice as a spell for our totems, as this skill is more effective the closer enemies are to the source of the projectiles. It makes playing Freezing Pulse much more fun and safer than the self-casting versions. If you are watching this build guide after patch 3.15 Expedition League and the title's patch number has been advanced, be sure to check the description down below for the path to building link and pinned comments. If there have been any updates on the build for its current viability, as some items, mechanics or skill selections may change in between patches, the build can differ from the video. So let's check it out. As a usual non-totem player, I found playing this build and Hierophant in particular extremely enjoyable. The totem playstyle with this Ascendancy and clear with 6 totems was very comfortable. This build starts very cheap, just requiring the bare minimum uniques for the true power and works into very expensive items once you have saved up. You'll start this build on a 0 chaos budget with random rares, our Hierophant Ascendancy and a 4 or 5 link setup. Once you manage to get your hands on a pair of Kikazarus and a Soul Mantle, you will truly feel the build's true power and begin boss killing really easily. You can further invest into Viridi's Veil, Coward's Legacy, Cluster Jewels, and a Pandemonious, allowing you to destroy all the game's content. Offensively, we are using Critical Strike Chance scaling with Freezing Pulse to deliver those juicy shatters. We are then pairing it with 2 First Snow Cobalt Jewels, giving us 4 more projectiles per totem along with the Soul Mantle body armor, 2 Kikazaru Rings, a Self-Flagellation Jewel, and a Clear Mind Jewel for even more damage multipliers. As we do not deal damage ourselves, we use Penance Brand to trigger Frost Bomb to apply cold exposure and a Sniper's Mark for crazy damage. Finally, we use Arcane Cloak for the extra lightning damage buff, which is huge. Defensively, we are totem based, so we can just sit back from the mobs and let the totems do the work. Of course, this is not always the case, so we get a few defenses. With the Hierophant, we always have 4 endurance charges for physical mitigation. We also gain more effective mind over matter, of which we pick up on the tree, and Arcane Cloak to absorb 2000 damage, bringing our effective health pool to over 7000. Passive life and mana regeneration is also able to handle most to all scenarios. Finally, we have a fairly quick movement skill and Cold Snap linked with cast when damage taken to freeze enemies when we take chunks of damage. For mapping, we simply run around slamming down totems in the face of our enemies and watch them shatter in one big blast of projectiles while looting. If you encounter a tougher monster, you can simply cast a Penance Brand. For bossing, we can swap out Freezing Pulse for Ice Spear, place the totems around the boss, cast Penance Brand, and just keep repeating until it's dead. For our pros, decent clear speed thanks to totems shooting very fast projectiles, excellent defenses due to many defensive layers, fantastic survivability, your totems are going to take the hits while enemies will stay frozen, a wide budget to grow the character, can do all map mods, no regen and reflect can be annoying, however it can be done, awesome single target damage. Our cons, it's a passive playstyle, it's totems and it's not for everyone. We are vulnerable to projectiles, have average sustain and mitigations, cannot face tank damage and must play smart. For class and Ascendancy, we are choosing the Templar's Hierophant. This Ascendancy gets insane bonuses for totems and makes them very enjoyable to play. Pursuit of Faith gives us a healthy amount of totem placement speed and duration along with an extra totem. Ritual of Awakening gives us more damage and much needed regeneration for each totem summoned, up to 30% more damage, 3% mana regeneration, and 6% life regeneration with 6 active totems. Conviction of Power provides a method for always having 4 endurance and 4 power charges, giving us extra resistances, physical mitigation, and allowing us to further increase our critical strike chance and multiplier. Finally, Divine Guidance amps up our effectiveness to 40% with the keystone Mind Over Matter, as well as more base mana and some extra damage. We grab the following keystones in the tree. Ancestral Bond. We cannot deal damage ourselves, but grants us another totem. We always need more buddies. Mind Over Matter provides us with more effective life and ways to gain regen. Pain Attunement for more spell damage and only for the Coward's Legacy version of the build. We don't get any stun immunity in this build, so Brown King helps prevent us from getting totally stun locked in bad situations. The reduced chill effect is also good, as your freeze flask can run out, leaving you more vulnerable to chill effects. Rizlatha will improve your ability to heal via your life flask, which is especially potent if you are in a high budget setup, since you always will be considered at low life from the Coward's Legacy bout. Soul of Ugel is another solid option with 20% reduced effective curses on you. As a league starter, helping Alira is simply too beneficial to this build to take over 2 passive skill points. The resists and mana regeneration are super useful at the start of the game and remain good bonuses, while critical strike multiplier is weak early, but the strongest defensive stats available to us at endgame. However, for min-maxing, you can get more damage out of 2 passive skill points with cluster jewels. The support gems listed are in order of priority, so drop gems as needed to fit your available links. Please note that if you are not yet using a soul mantle, you'll need to swap a support gem out for a spell totem to convert Freezing Pulse into a totem. In this case, I recommend swapping out increased critical damage for spell totem. This should be your priority for your first spare 4 link. Arcanus Brand, once attached to an enemy, will apply a sniper's mark in the area, causing enemies to take increased damage from our projectiles, and Frost Bomb, which will also apply cold exposure. We also make use of Spell Cascade to increase the area we cover. This is your priority for your second 4 link. We use Arcane Cloak for a huge damage buff to our totems and allows us to absorb around 2000 damage, which is better than using Immortal Core or even Steel Skin. We pair this with Arcane Surge and increased duration for more spell damage, mana regeneration, and a longer duration. We run the setup for when we take damage. It will drop a Cold Snap chilling area, increasing cold damage taken thanks to Bone Chill support. Keep cast when damage taken at level 1, which will allow you to have a level 7 Cold Snap. We want this to trigger as much as possible. We use Flame Dash as a means of moving around faster and to proc Arcade Surge once again for damage and regeneration when we have Arcane Cloak downtime on the bosses. Your final links is yours to decide. However, I use a Portal Gem with Vol Righteous Fire and increased duration, as it is a big damage increase when available. Make sure that your portal is not linked with Vol Righteous Fire and increased duration. Moving on, a good rare helmet is your target here. You'll want life, resistances, and dexterity. You can also use Frigid Fossils to roll nearby enemies have negative cold resistance on your helm and hope for some decent rolls. Later on, we aim to get the Viridi's Veil and should not be used if you don't have the Coward's Legacy belt yet. For the helmet enchant, we look for Freezing Pulse projectile speed, as Freezing Pulse drops off in damage and freeze chance the further it travels. So the faster you can make the projectile go, the more damage it will do at any given point in its travel path. Soul Mantle chest piece is mandatory for this build, but you could use a Tabula Rasa until you get your hands on one. This build utilizes Soul Mantle for 2 reasons. 1. It gives us another +1 to maximum totems, and 2. Because we are going to make use of the fact that it applies curses to us every time a totem dies. which means each time you summon new totems beyond your maximum amount of 6, it counts as the totem still dying. Combining this with the 2 Kikazaru Rings and the Sanctum of Thought passive tree notable, we have a full 100% reduced effect of curses on us, meaning we no longer suffer the effects of any curses applied to us, including the map modifiers. We then turn these curses into damage buffs via the Self-Flagellation unique jewel, which grants us up to 20% increased damage for every single curse on us. Our gloves are just rare with life, resistances and mana if you need to balance your mana pool for mind over matter. This is also a decent slot to try to pick up some much needed dexterity. As for the gloves enchant, Commandment of Spite will give a defensive trigger that will sometimes chill enemies when you are hit. A pair of rare boots with life, resistances, mana, and movement speed will be ideal. You could also try to get a pair with increased skill effect duration, however those will be rather expensive. For our enchant, we aim to get 120% increased critical strike chance if you haven't killed recently, or damage penetrates 10% of enemy resistances if you have not killed recently. Since our totems are killing instead of us, we have these effects up permanently, which is really cool. The crit will be slightly more powerful when min-maxing, of course. A rare scepter, wand, or even dagger will all work here. You will look for the standard caster stats such as spell damage, cast speed, cold damage to spells, increased cold damage, increased critical strike chance to spells, global critical strike multiplier, and +1 to level of all cold spell skill gems. As mentioned with the body armor, this build uses 2 Kikazaru Rings to give us 80% reduced effects of curses on us, with the final 20% coming from the passive skill tree. These rings are required to prevent the curses that Soul Mantle will apply to you as you summon totems. Thankfully, these are always cheap, and if you don't have a Soul Mantle yet, you can use these rings with life, mana, and resistances. For our Viridi setup, we will use an Essence Worm with a magic ring, so we don't take extra damage from critical strikes. A good rare amulet is my recommendation here, with global critical strike chance, global critical strike multiplier, some life, and resistances possibly. You should look for these on jade, citrine, or turquoise bases for the extra dexterity. The Pandemonious is the best choice for later on when we have Viridi's Veil and Cow's Legacy setup, as it gives us the cold penetration and blind for more safety. Plus, did you see it's a jade base, so it's not wasted when you swap your amulets? For our anointment, we first use Battle Rouse or Flash Freeze. With Viridi setup, you should use Whispers of Doom so you can run Frostbite instead of increased duration in our Penance Brand setup for even more damage. Another rare slot with 2 options. We can either get a Stygian Vase for the Abyss Jewel for extra life and cold damage to spells, and then later on use a Coward's Legacy with Viridi's Veil. That aside, we look for life, resistances, and any flask bonuses or mana. For our jewels, First Snow is number 1 gearing priority. Each of these jewels give us 2 extra projectiles to Freezing Pulse, as well as minor damage bonuses in the form of projectile damage and after you have shattered an enemy. For corrupted versions, look for You Cannot Be Maimed and You Cannot Be Hindered. Self-Flagellation is what you use when you have your Soul Mantle and Kikazaru Rings. This jewel grants us up to 20% increased damage for every curse on you, which thanks to Soul Mantle you will have plenty of. This jewel provides us with enormous amounts of damage for this build. Clear Mind is our last jewel for this build and grants a nice chunk of mana regeneration and spell damage. Since we don't use auras and utilize Mind over Matter, this jewel fits nicely into the build. For our flasks, we will be using the following. Diamond Flask, a good flask for extra critical strike chance. Silver Flask, to give us more mobility and damage. Quicksilver Flask, to run around even faster. The Wise Oak, a great source of damage and defense for all elemental builds. You will want to ensure that your cold resistance is the highest uncapped resistance for this to penetrate cold damage. Finally, you will want a life flask rolled with increased or instant recovery and remove bleed on use. It can be a divine or an eternal. Holy Flame Totem is an excellent leveling skill. It's available right from the start and doesn't require alternating your passive skill tree. It can carry you up to maps with just 4 links with no problem. To obtain a decent leveling weapon, you need to sell a magic scepter, wand or dagger along with a ruby ring and an orb of alteration to get added fire damage to spells. For Act 1, Frost Blink, Flame Dash, and Clarity don't need to be linked to anything, so just fit them in wherever you can in your gear. Your damage spells, however, will want as many gem links as you can find for them. Once you get access to Wave of Conviction, drop Purifying Flame and slot Wave of Conviction instead. Herald of Ash does not need to be linked to anything, so just fit it anywhere you can. Though, ensure it isn't connected to a spare support gem that might increase its mana reservation. You also want to shuffle your ideal links a bit with the new support gems available. You usually won't have access to 4 links in Act 2, so level your remaining supports and other gear pieces until you can add them to the desired links. Prioritize giving Wave of Conviction your first 4 link if you get lucky enough to find one late in the act. I highly recommend helping Alira during this act instead of killing all the bandits for 2 passive skill points. In Act 3, Flammability can be slotted without support links, as you really will only cast this on bosses and tough areas for the time being. The library is an optional area as you won't need the Hypothermia or Cold Penetration gems until you switch to Freezing Pulse. However, doing the library quest allows you to buy leveled versions of these gems, including Second Wind from Clarissa, making it easier to come back and buy them when you're ready to do so later. You can also buy them now and level them in your weapon swap set if you prefer. Once you blast open the belly of the beast, you'll have access to multiple totems. This gem not only allows you to drop 2 totems at once, but also grants the linked skill, and only the linked skill, plus 2 to the maximum number of totems. What this means is that even after you've dropped up to 3 Holy Flame totems down, you can still drop 2 more Wave of Conviction totems on top of that, for a total of 5 totems, which marks the point where you should consider taking Ancestral Bond and do Normal Lab to fully embrace the totem way of life. Now that we have all of our main skill gems sorted, the rest of the campaign can be easily completed on these 4 link setups. You can just focus on quests, gear upgrades, and your skill tree progression. In Act 5, make sure to take your free First Snow unique jewel reward from the Death to Purity quest. Remember, when switching from Holy Flame Totem to Freezing Pulse, it is important to refer back to the skill gems and gearing section in this guide to adjust your gem links and get any other gems you require for the Freezing Pulse setup. Now that we got our daily totem benches in to build up those big boy muscles for our Pantless League start, we are ready to take it all on. This build has been a lot of fun to play, and the sheer amount of overkill damage made it just that much more satisfying. As a side note, the Hierophant really makes playing totem builds much more enjoyable, not only for the high amount of totems, but for the insane placement speed and duration of the totems. I highly recommend this build to anyone looking for an easy league start and progress to bossing without having to be up in the danger of the battle. If you enjoyed this build guide, smack the like button and subscribe to see more awesome weekly build guides. Also be sure to comment down below if you will be playing the build or have any questions relating to the build. Thanks for watching Exile, and I'll see you in the next one.